Today we'll be reading chapters 4 and 5 of The Chocolate Touch. We left off with John Midas being able to taste everything that he put in his mouth as chocolate. We know he had a problem. He was eating too much candy and chocolate, so the doctor wanted him to stop. He had gone to a little store, eaten a piece of chocolate from there, and now everything he touches and puts in his mouth tastes like chocolate. John had the bad habit of chewing things when he was thinking hard. This morning he had several things to think about. What had made the toothpaste taste like chocolate? What had made the orange juice taste like chocolate? What had made the bacon and egg taste like chocolate? What had made the toast and butter and marmalade taste like chocolate? Each one of these things had felt the way it had always felt before. The toothpaste had been soft and pasty. The bacon had been hot, crisp, and oily. The toast had been crunchy, and the marmalade sticky and lumpy. But everything had tasted like chocolate. He had eaten in bed, like the chocolate he had eaten in bed last night. John put a gloved thumb in his mouth and thoughtfully chewed. His mother had frequently pointed out to him that chewing his gloves made little holes that let in the cold air, but he chewed them just the same when he was thinking hard. This time he noticed something very queer about the thumb of his glove. Okay, queer means odd, weird. Instead of tasting feathery, it tasted like chocolate. John pulled his thumb out of his mouth. The part of the glove that had been in his mouth was now brown instead of black like the rest. He bit the end of the leather thumb again. It came right off in his mouth, leaving his own thumb bare. John chewed, and it was like chewing leather made of chocolate, leather that melted like chocolate. In a second or two, he swallowed it. The gloves were not new. John had them quite a while. He couldn't understand why he had never thought of eating them before. He tried to tear off one of the fingers, but the leather was too strong for him. He put it into his mouth, and it immediately turned into chocolate. Then he was able to break it off easily. He popped it into his mouth and chewed it up and swallowed it. It was delicious. Walking along, devouring his glove, John did not notice one of his schoolfellows, Spider Wilson, until he heard his voice. "John's gone crazy! John's gone crazy!" Spider yelled. Then he turned on John. "Don't they feed you where you live?" he sneered. Spider was in the grade just above John's and one of the meanest and slyest boys in the whole school. John gulped down a large piece of the second glove's palm and looked pleased. "What's the matter?" Spider demanded. Do your people make you eat leather?" "This is special leather," John replied. He licked his lips and sighed contentedly. "It turns into chocolate as soon as you put it into your mouth. Look." John bit off the glove's little finger and took it out of his mouth. "Now it's chocolate." He put it back into his mouth and gulped it down. "Give me a piece," Spider said. "Why should I?" John wanted to know. "They're my gloves." "Hand over a piece," Spider said. "Do I eat your gloves?" John asked reasonably, his mouth full of chocolate. "Why should you eat mine?" "Those aren't real gloves," Spider said. "Whenever one person has candy, he has to share it with the others. That's the club rule." "What club?" John asked. "Never mind what club," Spider said, "but you better let me have some of that chocolate." Without waiting longer, Spider snatched what was left of the second glove. John was too surprised to resist, and he didn't want to anyhow. He had a feeling that he'd had enough chocolate for a while. He was getting a bit thirsty. Spider ran only a little way ahead. When he saw that John wasn't going to fight to get the glove back, he started to eat his prize. He stuffed the leather into his mouth and took a big bite. Spider stopped short in his tracks. He frowned and bit deeper into the leather again. Disgusting. It tasted worse than just leather. It tasted like leather with which a boy had made mud pies and snowballs and patted old dogs. John thought perhaps he might be getting late for school, so he started running. He left Spider Wilson spitting the soggy remains of the glove into the gutter. Still giggling to himself about the defeat of the enemy, John walked between the great stone pillars at the entrance to the school grounds. He had gone no more than halfway to the main building when he heard Susan Buttercup calling him. She was standing near the jungle gym with some of her friends. "I've got something to show you, John," she shouted. As she came running to meet him, he could see that she was waving something in her hand that flashed as it caught the rays of the sun. It was a silver dollar. "It's a birthday present," she explained, showing him the dollar. "Isn't it beautiful?" The sight of such wealth made John forget about the triumphs of his own day. "It's a good present," he said. "Are you sure it's made of silver, though? I once got a whole bag of old coins in a Christmas stocking, only they were chocolate coins covered with gold paper." Of course it's real, silly, Susan said. My daddy said so. You can feel if you don't believe me. She handed him the coin. Sorry, if you boys and girls, if you hear my dog snoring next to me here. John looked at the coin suspiciously. All right, Susan said, bite it if you think it isn't real. Go on, bite it. John felt rather silly. I could see it's real now, he said, but I don't have to bite it. But I want you to, Susan insisted. You weren't sure. Well, make sure. That's what they always do on television. When a cowboy wants to make sure a dollar's real, he bites it. John put the dollar about halfway into his mouth and reluctantly bit it. His teeth went right through the coin. The part that had passed between his lips was hard but sweet chocolate. Susan could hardly believe her eyes. She had given John a complete circle of silver. He sadly handed back a crescent. John didn't know what to say. Susan couldn't speak. Tears trickled down her cheeks like rain down a window pane. She looked at the piece of dollar in her hand. She looked up at John, whose face was red with embarrassment. John Midas, Susan blurted out at last. I hate you. She turned it and ran away before John could think of anything at all to say. Chapter 5. John hung up his coat, got his notebook and pencil out of his locker, and sat down at his small table, just in time for the second bell when Miss Plimsoll walked silently into the classroom. As soon as she appeared in the doorway, all the chattering and scuffling stopped. The 20 boys and girls sat straight in their chairs and looked straight ahead at the clean blackboard. Good morning, children, Miss Plimsoll said. Good morning, Miss Plimsoll, the class answered respectfully. Miss Plimsoll sat at her high desk, blinking her eyes as she surveyed the room. Then she opened a little drawer in her desk and pulled out a spectacles case from which she took her reading glasses. She removed her long-distance glasses, put on her short-distance glasses, snapped shut the spectacles case, replaced it in the drawer, shut the drawer, tilted her head forward so that she could look over the glasses on her nose and said, This morning, children, we're going to have an important test. There were some groans and a few oohs and ahs. Miss Plimsoll lifted up one of her hands, and silence was restored instantly. No complaining, please, she said sternly. This test will show me how well you have been learning your arithmetic this year. It will be a short one. I'm going to write just 4 problems on the board. I shall expect you to solve them all swiftly and accurately and to write your answers neatly. You will place your paper in front of you now. You will write your name at the top right-handed corner, and then you will place your pencil beside your paper, sit back in your chair, and wait until I give the signal to begin work. Miss Plimsoll turned to the blackboard and began chalking up the test problems. Tests always made John nervous. Besides, his lips were feeling dry, and the taste of chocolate was strong in his mouth. He raised his hand. Yes, John, Miss Plimsoll asked. Please, may I go and get a drink of water? Please, Miss Plimsoll, he asked in a small voice. Very well. Hurry back. We're going to start in a few minutes. John gratefully slipped out of the room and walked quickly down the quiet corridor to a water fountain. His tongue felt thick with chocolate. The cold water would be refreshing. He pressed his foot down on the fountain treadle, and a stream of clear, ice-cold water spurted up from the silver nozzle in the white enamel basin. He lowered his head until the jet of water reached his lips. The cold water splashed delightfully against the outside of his mouth. He opened his lips. As soon as the water gushed in, it turned to ice-cold chocolate water, thin and sweet. Quickly stopping the flow, John looked with dismay at the shallow puddle that had formed and was now draining away in the basin of the fountain. He hurried to another fountain on the second floor of the building, but there the same thing happened. The clear, ice-cold water turned to liquid chocolate in his mouth. When John finally got back to the classroom, all the other pupils were bent over their tables. Okay, pupils in this sentence means students. Busily scratching away. Miss Plimsoll looked up from her book as John tiptoed in. She looked at the clock on the wall, looked back at him, and waved her finger reprovingly. John began on the first of the 4 problems, but he was so worried about the chocolate water that he couldn't keep his mind on his work. By the time he was ready to start the 4th problem, the other boys and girls were already putting down their pencils and straightening up and smiling at each other. 2 minutes to go, said Miss Plimsoll. Concentrating hard, John took the end of his pencil between his teeth and began to nibble it. It immediately turned to chocolate. Then he noticed an even more disturbing change. As though he had taken the pencil out of his mouth, as soon as the first piece of chocolate had crumbled off, the pencil was continuing to change to chocolate. The chocolate was slowly but steadily moving down the pencil, replacing the wood and the lead inside, changing it to a chocolate pencil before John's very eyes. The magic, for John now knew that his power must be magic, was apparently getting stronger. By the time the whole pencil had changed from red, yellow, and black to dark brown, Miss Plimsoll was announcing that only a few seconds remained in which to write down the final answer. Just a minute, John pleaded. Shh, Miss Plimsoll cautioned him, holding a finger up to her mouth. Shh, chorused the slow workers, who were becoming almost as excited as John. But John felt worst of all. He felt sure that he could finish the problem and write down the correct answer if only he had something to write with. But Miss Plimsoll, he begged in a loud whisper, my pencil's turned to chocolate. Hush, John, Miss Plimsoll said. I'll speak to you after the bell. John tried to write with his changed pencil, but the point was too soft, and he only succeeded in making a chocolate smear where he should have written 72. Okay, so we met a few new characters in this story. So we had Miss Plimsoll. Now, we did hear about her in the first chapter, but we hadn't actually had her talk. We had Susan Buttercup, who finally talked in the chapter, because we had also heard about her. And we had a new one, Spider, and Spider's last name was Wilson. I also feel our problem changed a little bit now. Our problem, yes, we still have the problem that he eats too much candy, but the new problem seems to be that everything John puts in his mouth turns to chocolate. So we seem to have two problems in this story. And we're going to have to figure out how both are solved. Turns to chocolate. Okay, we had 3 vocabulary words as well in these chapters. And those words were queer, which is odd or weird. We had pupils, which means students. And we had, nope, that's it. I'm sorry, 2 words. We only had 2 vocabulary words, queer and pupils. So you are going to use this and make sure you look back to answer the